Hey guys, I'm JC and today we're playing Hanada Dawn-Crowned. This is a deck that looks to abuse spells with multiple targets and control the board until it can draw into one of its win conditions. If you enjoy how this deck plays out, then make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech discussing all of the included cards as well as the overall strategy. Let's see if Hanada has what it takes to get the job done. Alrighty guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Lightpaws Emperor's Voice, we have Dahada Binder of Wills, and we also have Freyalise Lanoir's Fury. Okay, if we take a look at our opening hand, it's quite good. We've got 2 pieces of ramp so we can get to Hanada fairly quickly, 2 lands, which is good. We have interaction to take care of all our opponent's stuff, especially Lightpaws, which can tend to be a pretty fast deck, so I think we can keep this. Freyalise starts us off by playing a land for turn, and they cast an Arbor Elf. And that is going to be it for them. We draw a Mystic Confluence for turn, so we'll just start by playing our Rogran Triome. It'll come into play tapped, and then we'll pass it right on over. Lightpaws plays a land for turn, and they cast an Esper Sentinel. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. And that is it for their turn. Dahada plays a Shock Land for turn, but they just have it come into play tapped, and that is it for them. Freyalise plays a land, and now they cast an Allosaurus Shepherd. This spell can't be countered, green spells you control can't be countered, and for 6 mana until end of turn, each elf creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 and becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other types. Then they follow that up with Sylvan Scrying, which does trigger Esper Sentinel, but they won't be able to pay. Search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see a Gaia's Cradle go into the hand here. Let's see what they do. And it's a Gaia's Cradle. And that is going to be it for them. Alright, well unfortunately bad news for us. We're going to probably have to feed this Esper Sentinel here. We do draw a land for turn. So we'll start by playing our Exotic Orchard. And then we'll cast our Talisman of Creativity. That triggers Esper Sentinel, we won't pay. And that is going to be it for us. Lightpaws plays a land for turn, and then they cast SRAM, Senior Edificer. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Now they move to combat. Esper Sentinel swings our way. We'll take the damage. That knocks us down to 39, and that's it for the Lightpaws player. Dahada plays a fetch land for turn. They crack it straight away. They just put a tap land into play. And that is it for the Dahada player. So this Gaia's Cradle of the Freyalise player is going to become a problem for us pretty quickly, but luckily we do have Volcanic Offering, which can take care of it. We just have to hope they don't get off to too fast to start here using all that mana. So I'm guessing we may see Freyalise come down here. And it looks like that is the case. Now that does trigger Esper Sentinel, which they won't be able to pay for. Freyalise's +2 is make a 1/1 green elf druid creature token with tap add green. -2 is destroy target artifact or enchantment. And -6 is draw a card for each green creature you control. Now they uptick Freyalise, making a druid token. And that is going to be it for them. We draw an island for turn. So we'll start by playing our Deserted Beach. And then we'll try to resolve Hanada. That resolves. And then we're going to pass the turn and hope Hanada survives around to our next turn, because if she does, we're going to be in a pretty strong position. Curse of the Swine and Volcanic Offering are hopefully going to turn the tides on our opponent a little bit, especially if we do see Lightpaws come down next turn. Lightpaws starts by playing a land for turn. And now they cast Swords to Plowshares, targeting Hanada. Exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. Well, unfortunately, we can't do anything about that, so we will put her back in the command zone. And then Lightpaws cast Sentinel Eyes, which does trigger SRAM, so they'll be able to draw a card. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance. And you can also escape it for 1 white mana and exile 2 other cards from your graveyard. That is targeting Esper Sentinel. So now it's going to make it much easier for them to be able to draw cards, which is a bit more of a scarier proposition now. They move to combat. This time Esper Sentinel swings towards Dahada, and so does SRAM. So now that Hanada is in the command zone, our game plan changes now to probably getting a little more ramp down and then holding up some interaction until we can get Hanada back on the battlefield. Dahada plays a land for turn, an Urborg. So now we all have swamps. And then they cast Athreos, God of Passage. Indestructible as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7. Athreos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. And that is it for them. Freyalise starts by playing a Deserted Temple for turn. It is going to allow them to untap a land, and that land is definitely going to be Gaia's Cradle. So the mono green player has access to a lot of mana at the moment, and with 5 cards in hand, that's a pretty scary proposition. Especially considering Freyalise is probably going to refill their hand soon, and The board state isn't in a position at the moment where we can knock those loyalty counters down. And now they put down a very dangerous creature in Thorn Mammoth. Trample, and whenever Thorn Mammoth or another creature ETBs under your control, it fights up to one target creature you don't control. The only one saving grace of that creature being on the battlefield is, yes, it is going to take out that Esper Sentinel. So we're not going to feed it too much. Then Freyalise upticks, making another 1/1 green elf druid. Well, hopefully that's gotten the attention of the Light Paws player. Now when the druid does enter, Thorn Mammoth is going to fight SRAM. So SRAM goes down. Now they move to combat. Arbor Elf comes our way. Allosaurus Shepherd goes towards Light Paws. And it looks like the Elf Druid goes towards Dahada. So just spreading out the damage. And that is it for their turn. We draw an Archmage Emeritus for turn, which would be really great if we didn't have that Thorn Mammoth on the battlefield. Alright, well I think we need to do a little bit of cleanup at the moment, and I think our opponents are going to help us here. So we'll start by playing an island for turn. We've got to really try to slow the Freyalise player down because they're getting way too far ahead here. Soon we're not going to be able to contain them. Now because Volcanic Offering is an instant speed spell, we can actually wait until we hit Dahada's end step to actually cast that. So I think from here we'll just pass the turn. Now they start by casting Katilda Dawnheart Martyr. Fly and lifelink protection from vampires. Katilda's power and toughness are each equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments, and you can disturb it for 5. Where enchanted creature has flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires, and it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. Right, that is going to be it for them. Dahada plays a land for turn. And then they cast the Reaver Cleaver. A quick creature gets +1/+1 and has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. Next, they cast Vampiric Tutor. Now they move to their end step. This is where we're going to cast Volcanic Offering. We're going to choose Gaia's Cradle as the non-basic land. We'll choose Light Paws here. I'm sure they're going to make the right decision, or at least I hope so. And they can target that deserted temple. And they do. Now we're going to choose Allosaurus Shepherd and hope that they choose the Thorn Mammoth because it's really shutting down their game plan at the moment. And they do choose the Thorn Mammoth, so this couldn't have worked out any better for us. And that'll at least slow the Freyalise player down quite a bit. And now we move to the Freyalise player's turn. Now Freyalise starts by ultimating their Freyalise Planeswalker, so now they'll draw a card for each green creature they control. So they might be wanting to make some land drops here to catch up on the mana that they missed out on. Even though in saying all of that, they still have access to 5 mana even after all that interaction hit them. So the Freyalise player is taking their time here. Unfortunately in chat, they weren't too happy with our play of targeting all their stuff, including some of the other players. They felt it was a misplay, which the rest of the table didn't really agree. Now they start by playing a fetch land for turn, they crack it. Now they cast a Crop Rotation, sacrificing a land. Search your library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. No doubt they're going to try to find some way of probably getting back their Gaia's Cradle. I'm sure from memory there is a land that actually does that. But instead they find themselves an Ancient Tomb. And now they cast Nyxbloom Ancient. Trample, if you would tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. Okay, that's quite a scary card to come down from a mono green deck that has access to a lot of cards in their hand. So it felt like we just got out of the frying pan and into the fire there. And that is it for their turn. Alright, well, let's hope we draw a land here because I'd say we're going to be on cleanup duty once again. And we draw ourselves a Felwar Stone. So I really wanted to hold on to our Curse of the Swine until we could at least wrap up Light Paws and maybe a few more good utility creatures, but I just feel like we can't let the Freyalise player untap with that Nyxbloom Ancient. So we'll start by playing our Izzet Signet, and now we'll cast our Curse of the Swine. We'll target Nyxbloom Ancient here and Katilda, just in case that starts getting pretty big. That goes through, and that is going to be our turn done. We're starting to slowly run out of answers here, so hopefully when it gets to our next turn, we can start to resolve something like our Archmage Emeritus and at least start drawing some more cards. Because otherwise we're going to fall slowly behind here, especially the Dahada player has been able to avoid a lot of the interaction, and I haven't taken my eyes off them yet. Light Paws starts by casting their commander. Whenever an aura ETB is under your control, if you cast it, you may search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to that aura, and with a different name than each aura you control. Put that card onto the battlefield attached to Light Paws, then shuffle. Next, they follow that up with a Spirit Mantle, actually targeting their board token. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has protection from creatures. Alright, they may actually be doing that here to try to take out Freyalise. That does trigger Light Paws, so let's see what they find. And they find themselves in All Is Glitters. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. Next, they cast a Lash Knife. If you control the planes, you may tap an untapped creature you control rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Enchanted creature has First Strike. That does trigger Light Paws once again. And Light Paws is currently a 5/5. And they find themselves a Daybreak Coronet. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and has First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink, which does take her up to a 9/9. Now they move to combat. The board token does swing in at Freyalise as we suspected. Freyalise goes down. And that is it for the Light Paws player. Dahada starts their turn by casting their commander, Dahada, Behinder of Wells. +2 up to one target legendary creature gains Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until your next turn. -3, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put any number of legendary cards from among them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put into the graveyard this way, which is what they're currently doing. And -11, gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. So they reveal a Mountain, Yahenni, Sword of Feast and Famine, and a Victimize. It looks like they decide to put 3 of them into their graveyard. The Victimize, Sword of Feast and Famine, and the Mountain. So they hold on to the Yahenni. Next, they cast Brimaz, King of Ereskos. Vigilance, whenever Brimaz attacks, create a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with Vigilance that's attacking, and it also does the same when it blocks. And that is it for their turn. Freyalise plays a land for turn. Now Freyalise casts Planar Bridge. Pay 8 mana, tap, search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Okay, well, we really don't have answers for that, so let's hope one of our other opponents does. Because it's an expensive card, but it's going to be quite dangerous once it starts to get active, and they definitely have enough mana to be able to activate it. And that is it for the Freyalise player. We draw a land for turn. So we'll start by casting our Felwar Stone. Then we'll play our Archmage Emeritus. Finally, we'll play our Steam Vents. We'll have it come into play untapped. And then we'll just sit back on our Arcane Denial and just hope we can get back to our turn with our board relatively unscathed and none of our opponents too far ahead. But we really have to hope one of the players here does actually take out that Planar Bridge. Not to mention Light Paws is starting to get pretty dangerous. If they end up putting some sort of protection that has protection from everything, where we can't really use our Mystic Confluence to bounce Light Paws, they may be able to just start taking out players here. So pretty dangerous board state all around at the moment. Light Paws starts by casting Shield, Duty, and Reason, targeting Light Paws. Enchanted creature has protection from green and from blue, so we shouldn't have said anything. That there was their answer. Now we could counter that, but I just don't think it's worth it. So it is going to be a little harder to remove Light Paws for us now. That does trigger Light Paws, so they are going to be able to find themselves an aura here. And they find themselves a Rafine's Guidance. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and you can cast it from your graveyard by paying 3 mana rather than its mana cost. Now they also equip Light Paws with Shielded by Faith. Enchanted creature has Indestructible, and whenever a creature ETBs, you may attach Shielded by Faith to that creature. That is going to trigger Light Paws once again. Now they find themselves a Battle Mastery. Enchanted creature has Double Strike. Alright, well that is a one-shot kill on any player. They move to combat. Let's see where they go. Let's keep our fingers crossed it isn't our way. Hopefully they're still a bit afraid of the Freyalise player, but we are playing Hanadi, you never really know. And they actually decide to go in towards the Dahada player here. Now they will be able to block, which they do with their Brimaz. That does trigger Brimaz, so they're going to make a 1/1 that is blocking as well. Now Brimaz and the token do die. That does trigger Athreos twice. They'll likely pay for it, seeing as they're gaining so much life from their commander. And they do pay the life. And that is it for their turn. Dahada starts by casting Yahenni, Undying Partisan. Haste, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Yahenni, and sack another creature. Yahenni gains Indestructible until end of turn. Now they uptick Dahada, targeting their Yahenni. So Yahenni will gain Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until their next turn. Now they move to combat. They swing Yahenni our way. We'll just let that through. And that's going to be it for Dahada. Alright, well Freyalise does untap with that Planar Bridge. So maybe they use it as an answer for Light Paws, or maybe they have plans of their own. We'll soon see. As we thought, they start by activating their Planar Bridge. Alright, well it's going to be really interesting to see what they find here. And they get themselves a Bane of Progress. Alright, well that's definitely going to do the job. So that at least stops the Light Paws player from being able to take us out now, which we're really happy to see. There wasn't really too much we could do about that at the moment. The other big benefit as well is Bane of Progress actually does take out their Planar Bridge, so it's sort of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone for us. Yes, we do lose a fair bit of our mana acceleration here, but we'll take it. So this has definitely been quite an up and down game, which I always enjoy. I think these back and forth games are some of the most enjoyable you can play, and that is it for the Freyalise player. We draw by Force, which isn't really going to be useful to us now. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough mana here to cast our commander. And while I definitely like to hold up our Mystic Confluence to be able to interact with our opponents, I think we actually have to try to draw some cards here. So we're going to cast it in our main phase, just so we can make sure that we actually hit our land drop. We choose the mode to draw 3 cards. That's also going to trigger Archmage Emeritus, so we're going to draw a card from that as well. So we draw a land from the Archmage trigger, which is really great. Oh, and there's some other good cards. The Goldspan Dragon in particular is going to be really useful here. against the Planeswalkers, as well as starting to accelerate our mana. So let's just play our Mountain for turn. And then we're just going to pass it over. They start by playing a land for turn. And now they cast Messer Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. Alright, well, that's a good card for their deck to have just after a board wipe. Allows them to recover pretty well. Next, they cast Ethereal Armor, which does trigger Messer Enchantress, so they can draw a card. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. Of course, that is targeting their commander here. Now that also triggers Light Paws. And they find themselves a Flickering Ward. As Flickering Ward ETBs, choose a color. Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. And you can pay a white to return it to its owner's hand. Really great combo with Messer Enchantress, so they essentially have access to card draw as well as protection to hit whoever they want to. Now they do move to combat. Let's see if they swing in and who they swing in at. But it looks like they decide to pass through combat. And that is it for their turn. Dahada starts by casting one of my favorite cards of all time, Ratadrabik of Urborg. Vigilance Ward 2 other zombies you control have Vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Next, they down-tick Dahada. Looks like we see a Sevinne's Reclamation, Vandal Blast, a Plains, and a Blackblade Reforged. Let's see how many go into the graveyard. It looks like 3 do, and those 3 were the Plains, the Vandal Blast, and the Sevinne's Reclamation. So the Blackblade Reforged goes to their hand. Now they cast the Blackblade Reforged. Equip creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. Equip legendary creature for 3, or equip any creature for 7. Now they move to combat. Let's see if they swing in here. No, they decide just to keep their creatures back. And that is it for the Dahada player. Freyalise starts by playing a Khan's Bastion for turn, a land that allows them to proliferate. Next, they cast a Seedborn Muse, untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. Well, that will be a dangerous card with Freyalise out because they're going to be able to use Khan's Bastion to proliferate every turn, get up to her ultimate and essentially draw a lot of cards, and do it with a frequency we don't want to see. And now they activate Khan's Bastion, proliferating. It looks like they're choosing Bane of Progress and Dahada here, so Dahada also gets a counter as well as Bane of Progress. Now they move to combat. Do they attack with the Bane of Progress? It looks like they do, and it is coming our way. I think we'll actually take the damage here, because I really want to keep Archmage Emeritus around. If they swing again next turn, we probably will have to block with it. And that is it for the Freyalise player. Alright, and we draw Magma Opus for turn. So let's start by playing our Plains. And next we'll try to recast our commander. That goes through. And then we're just going to pass the turn and sit on our Arcane Denial and hope that we can survive until our next turn. On our end step, it looks like Light Paws is attempting to return their Flickering Ward to their hand. In response to that, Freyalise activates their Khan's Bastion, proliferating. And it looks like they're targeting Dahada and Bane of Progress once again. So they're giving a bit of help here to the Dahada player. Flickering Ward bounces back to Light Paws' hand. And now we move to their turn. Light Paws plays a land for turn. Now they start by casting Flickering Ward targeting their commander. That does trigger Messer Enchantress. And they choose protection from green. Flickering Ward does trigger their commander. And they put a Mask of Law and Grace into play. Enchanted creature has protection from black and from red. Next they cast Darksteel Mutation targeting the Seedborn Muse. That does trigger their Messer Enchantress. In response, the Dahada player actually casts Deflect in SWAT targeting Darksteel Mutation. And it looks like Darksteel Mutation is now actually targeting Light Paws. That's really good to see because if it actually targeted Hanada here, we may have had to use our Arcane Denial. Now in response to that, it looks like Freyalise is using Khan's Bastion, probably as a reward to the Dahada player for helping them out. So it seems this may have turned into a two-headed giant game here. And yep, they do. They put a counter on Dahada as well as Bane of Progress again. So now Light Paws draws a card. Darksteel Mutation will resolve. So Light Paws is a 4/5, but a 4/5 indestructible bug. Next, Light Paws activates Flickering Ward, returning it to their hand. They just move straight through combat, and that is it for their turn. Dahada starts by down ticking. So let's see what they reveal. We see a Sharned, a Maze of Ith, a Crackling Doom, and a land. How much do they decide to keep? Looks like they put 3 into the bin, which ends up being Crackling Doom, Bloodstained Mire, and Maze of Ith. So they keep Sharned in their hand, which it is going to give their other legendary creatures menace, which won't be good news for us if they decide to swing our way. Now they move to equip Blackblade Reforged to Athreos. That's going to make him a 9/8. And next they cast a Toxic Deluge, X equals 4. Alright, well Freyalise has priority here first. Let's see if they do anything in response. So I just went in chat and I actually made a deal with the Freyalise player here. I said I'd actually counter it if they didn't swing in with their Bane of Progress at us. Either way, it's not great news for us because they are going to be able to get their Freyalise down next turn and start upticking it pretty quickly, but we really just can't afford to lose Hinata and Archmage here. We're just going to fall too far behind at the moment. So we cast Arcane Denial. That's going to trigger our Archmage to draw a card. I honestly think if we can keep our board state and draw a few more cards, especially keeping Archmage Emeritus down to fuel our hand, I think we can come back into this. We draw an Expansion Explosion. Okay, that's going to help us out quite a bit. That resolves. So everyone gets to keep all their creatures. Now they move to combat, and they actually send Athreos towards the Light Paws players. I'm surprised with that. I thought we may have actually got hit with it, seeing as we countered their spell. But they're still in a fairly strong position, so there's probably nothing to be too salty about. Light Paws just blocks with their commander because it is indestructible. So they won't be taking any damage here. And that's going to be it for the Dahada player. On Dahada's end step, Freyalise proliferates once again. And now we move to the Freyalise player's turn. Arcane Denial triggers on Freyalise's upkeep. So Dahada's going to draw 2 cards and we'll draw 1. And we draw ourselves a Chromatic Lantern. Freyalise starts by casting Survival of the Fittest. Green, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Well, this could be quite dangerous here. They do play a land for turn, a Scavenger Grounds. They have the ability to exile all graveyards. I'm pretty sure they have just enough mana to get a Craterhoof Behemoth to their hand if they'd want to. But instead, they actually recast their commander Freyalise. Next, they uptick Freyalise, making another 1/1 Green Elf Druid. Now they move to combat, and it looks like Bane of Progress is swinging towards Light Paws. Light Paws just blocks with their commander, but they're both going to bounce off each other. And that is it for their turn. We draw a land for turn. So let's start by playing that land. Next, we'll play our Goldspan Dragon. That goes through. Now we'll move to combat. Now Dahada is holding up priority here. I'm wondering if they do have interaction in their hand, but they have to remember Hinata has a really great ability that says spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast for each target. So they might be trying to target something here and wondering why it's not actually working. And unfortunately, it looks like we actually had the Dahada play a timeout there. So I don't really know what happened, but they're out of the game unfortunately. They start by activating Khan's Bastion to proliferate. Alright, so now we move to the Light Paws player's turn. They start by casting Sage's Reverie. And Sage's Reverie ETBs, draw a card for each aura you control that's attached to a creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each aura you control that's attached to a creature. Looks like Freyalise has a response to this. They activate Khan's Bastion, proliferating. They decide to proliferate Bane of Progress and their commander. Now when it ETBs, they're going to draw themselves quite a number of cards here. That puts them up to 10 total in their hand. Now they play a land for turn, an Ancient Tomb. Next, they follow that up by casting an Eland Umbra. Enchanted creature gets +0/+4 and it has Totem Armor. That triggers Messer Enchantress. They draw a card. And the Umbra is actually targeting their Messer Enchantress as well, which is a good choice. They do want to keep their card advantage engine online. Now they move to combat. But they actually decide to pass through combat, and now we go to the end step. And it looks like Freyalise activates Survival of the Fittest. So let's see what card they find here. Let's see if it is the Craterhoof Behemoth. And they actually find themselves a Woodland Bellower. So it gives them the ability to be able to tutor a creature they need. Alright, so on the end step here, I think we're actually going to try to cast our Magma Opus. We'll choose Freyalise for 1 of the damage. We'll also target Arbor Elf. Our Goldspan Dragon, so we can make a treasure token. And then we'll choose another elf token. We'll tap down Light Paws, as well as Messer Enchantress. And let's cast our Magma Opus. That's going to trigger Goldspan Dragon and Archmage Emeritus. So we'll start by drawing a card. It looks like Freyalise has a response here. And they cast Heroic Intervention. Permanents they control gain Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn. Well, unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that. So they'll be able to keep their board state as well as their Freyalise up on their high loyalty. So we'll just draw a card here. Oh, we get Distort in Wake. Well, let's hope we get to our next turn. We'll make a treasure token using Goldspan Dragon. And now Magma Opus can resolve. It makes us a 4/4 token. We also get Stormkiln Artist and Orvar. Okay, so if we do get to our next turn, we are going to be quite dangerous, but I don't know. I don't like our chances at the moment. So let's move to the Freyalise player's turn and keep our fingers crossed that all is well. Freyalise starts by down ticking their commander. So now they're going to draw a card for each green creature they control, which is going to be 7. And if their board state wasn't scary enough already, having that many cards in hand with the Survival of the Fittest on board could mean that it's just going to be over here. Unfortunately, our Semester's End isn't going to really help us if they end up getting a Craterhoof down here and giving all their creatures trample. We won't be able to block that damage. Now they activate their Survival of the Fittest. And they do put a Genesis into the graveyard. So a bit of recursion. And they find themselves a Painter's Servant. So this might actually be a combo piece in their deck. All cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells and permanents of the chosen color in addition to their other colors. Next, they cast a Sol Ring. After that, they cast a Mana Vault. Then they play a land for turn, a Crystal Vein. You can sack it to add 2 colorless. Now they sacrifice their Crystal Vein and they cast their Painter's Servant. Let's see what color they name here. And the chosen color is black. And after that, they cast Life Force. Green, green, counter target black spell. Okay, well that's a pretty nasty combo piece, and unfortunately, we really can't stop that at the moment. And now they cast Woodland Bellower. When it ETBs, you may search your library for a non-legendary green creature card with mana value 3 or less, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. It looks like they find themselves an Eternal Witness, which they play straight away. Let's see what they're going to try to get back here. And it looks like they target their Heroic Intervention. So they're going to try to really keep their Life Force on board so they can essentially counter everything we do from here on out. And with that Seedborn Musing play, that's probably going to be a close guarantee that they're going to be able to. Next, they activate Khan's Bastion, so they're going to be able to proliferate. And they just decide to proliferate their Bane's Progress and their Freyalise. Now they move to combat. It looks like Seedborn Muse is going over towards Lightpaw's way. So is their Boar token. And so is the Bane of Progress. Lightpaws blocks the Bane of Progress with their Boar token. That goes down. Now they move to their end step. Well, while we do have an opening here, we're going to try to draw a few more cards. So we'll actually cast our Semester's End. We'll target Archmage, Hanada, and Goldspan Dragon. That's going to allow it to only cost 1 white for us. When we cast that, will trigger Archmage and Goldspan Dragon. So we make a treasure token. We draw a card, a land. And then we'll flicker our creatures with Semester's End. Now, unfortunately, one thing I did forget there is it actually does return it on our next end step. So that was a bit of a misplay on my behalf. That feels a little bad. I meant to do it in the second main phase. So not only are most of our spells going to be countered here, but we've also just removed 2 of our big attackers. So that feels pretty bad. So we'll start by playing our land for turn. And unfortunately, because whatever we cast here, no matter how inconsequential it is, the Freyalise player is just going to counter it anyway because they're going to be able to untap each turn. I think we're just going to have to pass the turn here. On our end step, Semester's End will return our creatures. And let's just keep our fingers crossed that the Lightpaws players has drawn into something. Even something like a Farewell would be great, but honestly, I don't think it's going to matter too much at this point. The Freyalise player has probably locked the board down for the most part. Lightpaws starts by cycling their Secluded Step. Now they cast Aegis of the Gods. It's an enchantment creature that says you have hexproof. That triggers their Messer Enchantress, so they're going to be able to draw a card. Freyalise allows that through, but that is going to be their turn done. On the end step, it looks like Freyalise activates their Khan's Bastion to proliferate. And they're actually choosing to proliferate our creatures as well, which I'm sure is just a little bit of a joke because they know they've got the game pretty much locked down now, so it's not going to matter too much. Now they activate their Survival of the Fittest. Let's see what they find here. And they actually get themselves a Regal Force, so I'm surprised they're not just looking for a finisher here because I'm sure they can actually get the job done. I don't think Craterhoof is in their bin, unless of course they just don't run that. They decided that's not a win con they like to run in their deck. Alright, well, we'll just pass the turn over. No point in really casting our Explosion because they still have the mana to be able to counter it. Now Freyalise starts by casting Regal Force. When it ETBs, draw a card for each green creature you control. Next, they uptick Freyalise, making a 1/1 Green Elf Druid. They play a land for turn. And now they cast Khan the Great Creator. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. And the rest doesn't usually seem to matter too much in these decks. It's usually just played as a hate piece against artifacts. So that means that shuts our treasure tokens off. So that goes through. Now they uptick Khan targeting one of our treasure tokens, so we'll destroy it because it makes it a 0/0. Now they move to combat. But they actually decide to pass straight through combat. And that is going to be it for their turn. Alright, and we draw a paradoxical outcome for turn. Right, well, I'm not really too sure at the moment whether our opponent's just playing with their food or they legitimately aren't drawing into the answers they need. It's hard to tell. Having a Survival of the Fittest on board certainly means if they have a creature win con that they can definitely get access to it, especially with the amount of cards they've drawn. But we'll do our best to play through it anyway. We might be able to hopefully get them to tap enough mana down that we can actually resolve some sort of spell, hopefully something like a Distorting Wake. Even a Bifrost would help us out a little bit here. So let's start by casting Bifrost, actually targeting the Painter's Servant. That triggers our Archmage Emeritus, so we're going to be able to draw a card. Freyalise responds by activating Life Force, targeting our Bifrost. So in response to that, we'll actually target our Bifrost here and attempt to copy it. That's going to trigger our Archmage Emeritus once again. Once again, Freyalise uses Life Force on our expansion. So we won't respond to that. We'll allow that to go through. Hopefully our Archmage Emeritus draws are pretty good. The first card we draw is an Aether Gale. Okay, that's really good. And the second card we draw is a Talisman of Progress. Well, at the moment, it doesn't look like our opponent actually has anything that can block flyers, so we may actually be able to take out Khan here, which will not only put our treasures back online, but will actually give us an extra treasure. So I think that's what we'll actually do. So let's move to combat. Looks like we have a response from Freyalise here to us move into combat. And they just activate Khan's Bastion, so they want to proliferate. They probably should have waited for us to declare our targets first. Oh, but it looks like we have a response from Lightpaws here to the Khan's Bastion activation. So we may actually be getting some help here from the Lightpaws player, which is going to be really great. And it looks like they actually flash in Benevolent Blessing, targeting their Messer Enchantress. When it ETBs, choose a color. Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. This effect doesn't remove auras and equipment you control that are already attached to it. That also triggers their Messer Enchantress. It looks like Freyalise allows that to go through. All right, let's see what they choose to proliferate here. I'm sure they're not going to be targeting our creatures now. So it looks like they're choosing Bane of Progress, their commander, and Khan. All right, so now that we're allowed to move to combat, we'll actually have to swing in with Goldspan Dragon and our commander to be able to take down the Khan. So let's try that. Just hope that our opponent doesn't have a Beast Within in their hand. Now that does trigger Goldspan Dragon, so we'll make another treasure token. Thankfully, Khan goes down. So now that we have access to our treasures, that gives us a lot more breathing room here. So it looks like they currently have access to 5 green mana, which means they're going to be able to counter 2 more of our spells. And when we try to cast Aether Gale, they'll definitely try to counter that. But I think that's our only choice at the moment, and we just have to hope that we can actually draw into something better with Archmage Emeritus. Well, let's actually try to target the Darksteel mutation here, because I want to try to bring Lightpaws back into the game. And we'll also choose Bane of Progress, Pain of Servant, Life Force, as well as Freyalise. And then finally, we'll choose the Seedborn Muse. We'll tap for 2 blue. That's going to trigger our Archmage Emeritus. Freyalise responds by activating their Arbor Elf, untapping one of their forests. Now they actually use the mana instead to cast their Heroic Intervention that they had in their hand. Well, that's actually better for us than what they might have thought of, because now we can actually attempt to cast an Offer You Can't Refuse. So we're actually going to do that now. That triggers our Archmage Emeritus. Looks like we have a response from Lightpaws. And there we go. Now we're talking. They cast a Path to Exile targeting the Pain of Servant. So this has become quite the epic turn and quite the stack battle here as well. Now they're going to have a hard choice. They're not going to be able to counter both of those, so we might actually get rid of the Pain of Servant here. Yeah, this has turned out to be quite a turn, that's for sure. I haven't had a stack battle like this in a really long time. All right, Freyalise responds by activating Life Force, and it looks like they're targeting the Path to Exile. Now Freyalise uses their final green mana that they can to activate Life Force here, and they're going to counter our An Offer You Can't Refuse. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cast our Paradoxical Outcome. We're going to choose to bounce our Goldspan Dragon and our Archmage Emeritus so that we can hopefully draw some cards. See if we can find a response here. That triggers Archmage and Goldspan Dragon because we did target Goldspan. So that's going to make us another treasure token. We are going to lose the ability of the treasures to tap for 2, but that's okay. Once we make the treasure token, we'll have exactly enough mana to be able to bounce everything with our Distorting Wake if we have an answer. What we'd really like to see is a Fierce Guardianship or a Deflecting Swat. That's what we can cast for free at the moment. So we get an Archaeomancer, just a land and an Arcane Signet, unfortunately. So now Life Force will counter an Offer You Can't Refuse. We'll draw a card here from Archmage Emeritus. This is really our last chance to hopefully intervene. And we just get an island, unfortunately. So Heroic Intervention will resolve. We'll draw a card from Archmage Emeritus, which is just another land. Now the one positive from that is Lightpaws is actually back on the battlefield and it has all its abilities available to them with 7 cards in hand. So all we really have to hope now is that they can actually find a way to one-shot kill the Freyalise player over there. So we'll play our land for turn. And I think we'll try to get down our Stormkiln Artist. And after all that, after that massive turn, I think we're just going to have to pass it over. We'll have to discard down to hand size. So we'll get rid of some of our mana rocks. And then we'll go to the Lightpaws player's turn. They play a land for turn. Next, they cast Darksteel Mutation, and interestingly enough, they're actually targeting our Hanada here. That does trigger their Messer Enchantress, so they'll be able to draw a card. So Hanada does become a bug now. So I think we might have to call it after this, guys, because as much as I like to play it all the way through to the end, I think the Freyalise player has pretty much hard locked it down. It was really that last turn that was our last hurrah to be able to get it done, and unfortunately we were just one counter spell away from being able to do it. If we just would have drawn into that, I think that would have been absolutely great to have seen us break out of that, but now, especially since it looks like the Lightpaws player's probably given up here, I don't know what they could find that could actually help us out. So I'll give it until the end of the Light Paws player's turn, and then I think we'll have to actually call it there. But overall, it's been a good game anyway. It was enjoyable. I was glad that we got to have that massive stack battle last turn. It was a lot of fun. So we see them actually put into play Ward of Lights. Enchant creature as Ward of Lights ETBs choose a color. Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. And they decide to choose black as the color. Next, it looks like they escape Sentinel's Eyes, targeting their Messer Enchantress. That does trigger Messer, so they'll draw a card. It's going to give their creature +1/+1 on Vigilance. That triggers Light Paws. Let's see what they find. Next, they cast Flickering Ward, targeting their Messer Enchantress. That does trigger the Messer Enchantress. In response, Freyalise activates their Khan's Bastion to proliferate. And then in response, Freyalise uses Life Force to counter Flickering Ward. Next, they cast Guildscorn Ward. Enchanted creature has protection from multicolored. That will trigger Messer once again. It looks like casting that actually dropped off all the other enchantments, so I'm not too sure if that was on purpose or what was going on there. But that does trigger Light Paws regardless. Next, Light Paws escapes Sentinel's Eyes. That triggers Messer Enchantress. That triggers Light Paws. But it looks like they couldn't find anything there. And finally, they cast Drannith Magistrate. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. And with that, it looks like the Light Paws player actually scooped it up. Now, I did just check chat, and it looks like the Freyalise player did say they had a way that they think they could have killed us next turn. So look, we'll move straight to their turn now. We'll give them this turn to be able to do whatever they do, and if they end up killing us, then that'll be it. But if not, if they can't kill us in this turn, then we'll give them the GG, because there's really no way we can come back from this. Unfortunately, we're just locked down too hard, and without any other opponents to help us, that's probably going to be that. So it looks like Freyalise activates Survival of the Fittest. They find themselves a Thunderfoot Baloth. So that'll definitely give them enough damage to get the job done. Now we move to their turn. Genesis and Mana Vault trigger on their upkeep. Now they play a land for turn. Next, they cast a Mana Crypt. Garrick's +1 says untap 2 target lands. -1 is create a 3/3 green beast creature token. And -4 creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. Next, Freyalise uses Khan's Bastion to proliferate. And they're targeting their Garrick, their Freyalise, their Bane of Progress, and our Hanada. Now they downtick Garrett, get in its ultimate, so now creatures they control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. They move to combat. They swing in with everything. We'll just take the damage because blocking isn't going to make a difference for us here. And that is the game done there, guys. All right, let's go to the review and discuss what happened. Well, you might not think so from the video length, but this game actually went for nearly 3 hours, so I was definitely feeling it by the end. But despite this game being so long, I really don't have much to say about it. There was a lot of back and forth, but in the end, Freyalise really had the grinding power to see it through to the end. One thing I will say though, is I really enjoyed that big stack battle we had where we almost resolved our Distorting Wake. It would have been so sweet to have resolved that because I would have loved to have seen how the game would have developed after that. Well, that's it from me today. Despite our hard-fought battle, unfortunately we couldn't bring home the win today, but all in all I think our deck did pretty good, especially considering we run no fast mana or tutors. Until next time, guys.